I'm gonna just step out here,
Okay.
and then you should be. Everything is good. The sync focus, lighting is good. Everything is good. Once you finish that, then we'll revert so we can get set up for the next shoot.
All right. Sounds good.
All right.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So, greetings and salutations, Larry. Let me go ahead and start this, and we'll get it going. All right.
Sure.
Hey, hey, my good friend Phil is going to join us as well, and
Okay.
we'll just continue the conversation. Hey, greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Reggie Smith, and welcome to another edition of Positive Attitudes. Positive Attitudes is a place where we bring you enlightening and empowering information, and we plug you into some useful resources. And also, we just are highlighting some of the people that are in the community out here just doing the damn thing. And you know that Positive Attitudes has an important healing effect on us. We know that for a fact because we've been living it. And we don't ask the question, what's wrong with you? We ask the question, what's right with you? And I'm glad that you can join us today. Today, I'm looking forward to having a conversation with some friends of mine who have been out here in the community doing their thing for a long time. And this gentleman right here, Dr. Larry Bryant, we've done some work together in the community. He is just, oh my goodness. The course that he created, HIV 101, over at Georgia State, an accredited course. I've been over there to speak a couple of times. I know that Larry was the pioneer of that, and it just blew my mind that you would do that. You know, we know that people need education, but to take it to that level just blew my mind. So I just wanted to have you in, Larry. Larry, how you doing, Larry?
I'm doing absolutely phenomenal. And it is just so great to be on this side of the earth, living life authentically, living life very fulfillingly, and living my best life.
Yes, yes, indeed you are. I know you just got back from Ghana not too long ago. We talked about that, right?
Absolutely. And I
How
will
was your
never,
trip?
ever forget that experience.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, Larry, I just wanted to talk a little bit about, being HIV positive and being a Black man and heterosexual. You know, it is not a lot of resources out there. Not a people don't seem to believe that they are eligible too. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the work that you're doing in the community, and what your take on HIV is today.
Well, here is the thing I think that is so important, that we have got to get the message out to be tested first of all. Whether you are LGBTQ, whether you're heterosexual, whether you're bisexual, being tested probably is one of the most important things, because now we have life-saving medication,
Right.
antiretroviral therapy. And let me tell you, that's not like it was when I came through the 80s and the 90s. If you are undetectable, that means that the level of the virus in your body is so low that our machines and our analysis process can't detect it, that you cannot pass the virus. So undetectable actually equals prevention, but you got to know your status. And some of the things I think that are important for us to know is, if you're not tested and then you acquire symptoms, that means the disease is pretty much progressed and much more difficult to treat. So if I could just pass the message, regardless of who you are, if you are actively engaged in sexual experiences, you should be tested. Know
Yeah.
your status.
Right, right, right. And being tested is an important part of knowing your status, maintaining a good health and wellness practices as well. And part of that good health and wellness is protecting yourself when you're having sex. A lot of people think that it's HIV is probably it's an STD now, and it always has been a sexually transmitted disease, but it's manageable. There are some other things out here you can catch that'll jack you up.
Absolutely. And STDs, for example, syphilis is rampant, particularly here in the Southeast. So yeah, there are other concerns that we really, really have to be very conscientious about when we're talking about health and wellness. And since you mentioned that, I am a part-time dissertation chair at Capella University. And one of the dissertations that I guided was a young lady who did her dissertation on the health and wellness experiences of those living long-term with HIV, and what are the implications for a younger generation of HIV positive individuals. And that's pretty significant implications in that you got people who are HIV positive, such as myself, for 27, 30, 35 years that can really inform a new generation of how it is that we stay positive, how it is that we stay healthy, how it is that we stay with our health. How do we adhere to medication and those kinds of things? And so I think, those kinds of that kind of information is important for us to transmit to a newer generation of individuals that may be HIV positive. And also those individuals, or helping those individuals who are HIV negative to stay HIV negative.
Yes, yes. And I'm glad you brought that up, because it's that type of academia that you bring to the actual lived experience that marriage is an important marriage. And we have to be able to bring that information and that knowledge on a level that people can understand it. And so thank you very much for sharing that. And I'm glad that you took it into the universities. And I know that you're working with some studies, and I'm sure we'll get a chance to talk about that. I want to take a minute to bring my good friend Phil into the conversation, because Phil is my buddy from New York City. What's going on, Phil? How are you today? Phil, turn your mic on. I don't know if we got you linked up. Yeah. Oh, open up your mic for me, Phil. Hit it. There you go. Hit it one more time. Yeah. Audio check 1 2 1 2. I got your mic open. So what you want to do? Oh, Phil. So Larry.
Yes.
While we get Phil's audio hooked up, let me ask you a question.
Sure.
So what are you seeing out in the community right now, and as it pertains to support groups and support and information? What do you think is most needed in the HIV community? And you alluded to something else, our lived experience and how we can help the world. I mean, when COVID hit, I saw plenty of opportunities for us to use our lived experience to help the world. What you see?
Well, for one, a lot of the work that I do is at the intersection of HIV as well as substance use disorder. And so one of the things that I think that's most important, that when we as providers and those that are really doing this work really need to address individuals from a holistic perspective. Because particularly those of us that are growing older oftentimes have other comorbidities that are also impactful. And so it's difficult for someone who may be HIV positive, that may have a substance use disorder, to be able, for example, to adhere to medication, and they don't have a place to live. They don't have food to eat. So we really have to look at the whole person. And we call that person-centered intervention. So in other words, the person becomes central and this other kind of tension here. So a lot of us look at the contrast between providing equal services versus equitable services.
Right. What?
There's a difference. There's an important difference as we're intervening with this population, in that to dispense our service equitably or equally doesn't always mean that everybody's going to get the service that they need. In contrast, when we're talking about delivering services that are equitable, we are focused then on outcomes. So in other words, there may be some individuals that may need more services, that may need more resources than others. And so we have to, as we intervene, make sure that all of their needs are met as best as we can, and not just saying we're just going to give everybody across the board an equal resource, where not everybody's going to be able to pick the apple up off the tree.
You know what? I think I got you on that one. So like you're saying, if we give equal resources, we're maintaining the status quo, where the level that you started on is the level that you're going to end up on.
Absolutely.
As it's in perspective of everyone else. But equitable is trying to level the playing field.
Right. And here's the other thing, Reggie, I think that's important, particularly us academicians, is that the voices of the community are important. The stories, our lived experience stories, are important to become a part of the conversation. And so a research project that we're embarking on, setting a proposal for, really looks at examining some of the barriers to recovery or recovery resources. But I think the thing that really makes this particular effort different is that we are asking for the insight, the opinions, the experiences of the community that we're serving. In terms of every part of the research process, we want your voices, we want your input, we want to know what your needs are as researchers, and we will be partnerships with the community in any kind of intervention that happens. And so I think that's very, very important. And almost all of the research that I've done, I make sure that I include community-based participatory research.
Yes, I know you definitely do that, and I appreciate you for that. And we try to do the same thing. We want to hear what's going on in the community with each other and provide peer-to-peer support. And so we created a peer support group called Positive Attitudes in our virtual community, VRDSF.com. And I wanted to try to bring some of that voice in. Phil, how's your sound now? Talk to me, Phil. Oh, man, I want your audio to work so bad because we want to hear you. And I really... Hey, Phil, I'm going to tell you what. Go out and come back in. Go out and come around the side door. Let me see if I can work you in it. All right. And we'll bring you back in, okay? So, Larry.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So the study that you're doing now, that you're planning on doing, just a little bit about that and maybe why you're doing it.
Well, for one, again, my purpose and my life is centered on substance use disorder prevention, as well as HIV/AIDS prevention. So almost everything that I do now sort of is aligned in those topical areas. And again, one of the biggest in the previous research I've done, one of the biggest issues is access to services. That's a big one, particularly for BIPOC communities. And so we've got to find out what are those barriers. So I had the privilege of directing the state's opioid and prescription drug overdose epidemic response with the Georgia Department of Public Health. And as a result of that, once I left the department, I still was involved in part of the strategic plan. And so they put out an RFP for a multicultural study, and we got funded for that. And so what the study was, it looked at vulnerable populations, and we did a needs assessment in terms of what these populations needed in terms of substance use disorder, particularly around the opioid and prescription drug overdose epidemic. And we invoke their voices for them to tell us what are some of their needs in terms of being able to access resources and access services. And they provided a variety of important information in terms of barriers. One of the biggest things that particularly this population, so there were 6 different populations that we did focus groups on. One was African Americans, we did veterans, we did seniors, we did college students, we did the trans community, and we did the LGBTQ plus community.
Okay.
And the needs of those communities, there were a lot of similarities. One, again, was providing affirmative care from their providers was probably the one most important thing. Because many of them didn't access services because they didn't feel, particularly the LGBTQ plus community, because they didn't feel like their providers respected them. They didn't feel like their providers really were interested in their needs. And so that was one of the overarching kinds of things that we found out from the community. Another one was having some kind of spiritual component to the intervention or to their services, because many of them are older individuals that really, when you're faced with life situations, and particularly around HIV and substance use, you really depend on your spirituality. And so that was something that was that had to be respected and also incorporated into their assessment as well as into their intervention. So really providing insight from the communities, I think, were very, very important. And another important thing was around the trans community. And when we talk about really providing holistic services, there was this tension in the room between HIV negative trans persons and HIV positive trans persons.
Really?
HIV negative persons felt like they could not get resources, could not get services. Some of them felt like it was almost that they had to become HIV positive for them to get basic services. And so I think that one of the issues is from the community that we really, even a lot of the funding is specifically for HIV positive individuals. But that funding really has to be not just for HIV positive, but for HIV negative persons as well. Not just for LGBTQ, but for heterosexuals as well. Not just for gay, but for bisexual as well. So when we talk about a holistic approach, we really do need to be very, very inclusive, because if we haven't learned anything else from the HIV/AIDS epidemic, that is any community that's left behind ultimately will come full circle, and it will impact that community. And that's how we go from, in the 1980s, from HIV looking like white gay men to now the epicenter 40 years later are black gay men, such that 1 in 2 black gay men are expected to get HIV within their lifetime.
That's right. That's right. And if we want to end the epidemic by 2030, and we want to end it as soon as possible, then we definitely have to include everybody. So, we definitely need to get the message. Everybody needs to feel respected, loved. The resources need to flow evenly and equitably. And so thank God for the work that we're doing, especially for those of us who've been affected and have been impacted for long periods of time.
And just another thing, Reggie, I think is important, and that is language. Now, these are, we can become agents of destigmatization. And so respectful language is very, very important. And we've got particularly the Diction Technology Transfer Center really puts out a magnificent document that looks at stigmatized language and contrast it with affirming language. So, for example, we no longer, in professional circles, we no longer refer to persons as addicts. We call them a person-centered, a person with a substance use disorder, a person with an opioid use disorder. So there's a lot of language changing that can happen, and we can do this right now in terms of being a part of destigmatizing substance use disorder as well as HIV.
Hey, I think I heard Phil's mic. Mic check, Phil.
All right, can you hear me?
Yeah. What's up? What's up? All right.
All right, how you doing, guys? Great, great. I've
Good,
been
and you?
listening though. I've been hearing. Might not been able to speak, but I can hear very well. Thank you.
Good. I'm glad because I know you heard a lot of things that may resonate with you, and I definitely wanted to get your take on it, Phil. I know you're up there in New York City, Nueva York.
Yes.
Man,
Yes, sir.
talk a little bit about your experience. I know I don't, you tell the folks about yourself, man, before I do anything.
Well, I was diagnosed in 1990, but it may have, of course, I may have had it longer than that because I was pretty promiscuous at a young age, all over the place. But I was diagnosed after coming out of a therapeutic community recovery program back in 1990, and when I was diagnosed, of course, I was denied for quite a while. But after a few years, especially, I mean, it took about good maybe 10 years after that for me to actually come out of denial and accept the fact that this is what it was, because I was feeling healthy. I never had how you say, a symptom that would, opportunistic, right? Just the regular stuff that comes with age, arthritis and high blood pressure and stuff like that. That's all dealt with.
Right.
And thank God, I'm grateful for that. But and I found myself working in the field of recovery for quite some while. I was actually in operations, and then I did a little clinical work. I moved down to North Carolina, but I was always never really self-disclosing or self-disclosing my status. However, I knew people who were HIV positive, and and I tried to help them without disclosing my own status, during that time period, because it was such a stick. I couldn't allow to get in the neighborhood as a wife and everything. She was like, "Frank, you do that," Thank God I passed that stage. It took a little while, but it just so happens that there's always these divine interventions that I run into that helps me to get to the next level. But however, I found myself working also in the field of recovery. Substance abuse, alcohol, and in North Carolina, I was working.
Oh man, going in and out, Phil. We lost you right there. When you said when you went to North Carolina is when we lost you. Oh man. So I'm telling you, you know what? I thought that New York had upgraded its Wi-Fi, but obviously not. Y'all got that booty Wi-Fi up in New York City, man. What's going on? Do I need to come up there and talk to the mayor? I'll tell you what, Phil, go out and come back in again. And in the meantime, we'll wait for you because I want to hear the rest of your story of what happened after you went to North Carolina and hear a little bit more about what it's been, because I can identify with you not sharing my status for 14, 15 years. You said 10 years. There was a long time when the stigma was so strong that it didn't make sense for us to share it because we were just putting ourselves in a situation where we had to try to heal other people or just try to knock down whatever negative energy that was coming at us. And, that wasn't good for the healing process. And obviously it was the best thing because here we are many years later and we're able to, in God's time, be able to share with the community what our story is and share some of the things that have been working for us. And that's what we really want to get to, is the positive things that have been working for you since you have thrived with HIV for this period. So go out and come back And let's see if we can jiggle your sound one more time. All right. All right. So, Larry, let me see. Larry, are you there?
I'm here.
All right. So while we wait for Phil, I just want to maybe get a little bit more of a take on where you see things going in and what really needs to happen in order for us. Because I'm right now I'm on the Cabanuba as a treatment, and there are psychosocial issues that go along with this disease. We all know, and so now that we're not taking meds every day. We've been around for a period of time, so we become more comfortable with ourselves. We found our way in the community. We're able to share our stories and so that we can help other people. And it's not a cure, but we're pretty much healed on a daily basis. What do you see in terms of the psychosocial issues and how they are lingering and still playing a part? And do you, in your estimation, think that it's having an effect still on our health, or is it just us growing older that we have all of the other issues that we're dealing with physically, mentally, and spiritually?
Well, and I think it's probably, part of all of that. And I was just listening to the conversation about disclosing and disclosing one's status. And let me just tell you, it takes a lot of courage to stand before the masses and just be authentic and transparent, particularly about one's substance use and one's HIV status. Because again, even within the recovery community, there's still stigma associated with HIV, and we don't hear a lot about it. We really don't. But I think it's powerful. I think it's powerful to get to a point in your life where you're comfortable enough with who you are that you can share all of yourself and not be afraid that it's going to come back to haunt you. Because it's only been maybe within the last couple of years that I've been able to share my status before the public. And I did that because it's freeing. And I think it doesn't hurt to the fact that now that we're undetectable and it can't be transmitted, I think that has a lot to do with
Right.
Because
it's that need for love, right?
It's not like before when there's all this fear around passing it. Now, if you're undetectable, you can't pass it. And HIV probably is the most important thing. It's syphilis and these other things that we have to be, monkeypox.
And that's tricky too, because now that it's undetectable, it's untransmittable, U equals U. And then a lot of people are taking off condoms. And if you're not in a committed relationship, a truly committed relationship, there's a lot of vulnerability around that.
Absolutely. And, I think that, that is part of the issues we're having in our community because we're becoming very lax in terms of safety practices. And so I think that, this whole idea that we can just do, and I can't tell you, people, I don't know, it seems to be a fad that having sex raw now is just like the thing to do.
Well, that's not a fad. That's a feeling. I mean, and it's a good feeling. I'm not mad at that, but
but I'm not talking about a married, but I'm talking about someone that's not necessarily in a committed relationship.
Yeah.
And also, I think we have to be also aware, particularly in the gay community, around crystal meth.
Okay.
And around its impact on our community in terms of HIV and the perpetuation of HIV through sex.
Right. Because getting high and having sex is a combination for contracting venereal disease because we be wilding out.
And crystal meth is its own animal.
Oh, is it? Yeah, I don't know. I'm BC. I'm before crystal meth. I'm before crack, And
Well, I that was my drug of choice back in the early 80s in Los Angeles, California. So I know. And
okay.
it is one of the most addictive substances known to man, woman, and very, very difficult to get off.
Phil, you know anything about that?
What's that? That crystal meth?
Yeah, or drugs and the
Uh,
combination of drugs and sex and venereal
yeah,
disease.
I've had. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, clear.
Yeah, yeah. I had to switch to my cell phone. I'm on the cell phone now.
Oh, great.
Well, yeah. Well, no, not the crystal meth in specifically. You know, that was not one. Well, it was not something that was around or maybe available at that time. But I did everything else. Believe it, you could tell it from sniffing the glue to dropping the acid and the heroin and the crack and the whole thing. Just I was all anything and everything that would get me outside of myself. I used it, and in the meantime, in using that, of course, sex played a picture in that because I was pretty much thought I was a player from the Himalayas and was just sticking it in every girl on the rooftops, in the cars, wherever, and eventually it caught up with me, in older age, not older age, but later on in life, I realized, and especially after I was diagnosed back in the 90s. Boy, as far as advocacy is concerned, I haven't been involved too much in the advocacy part. I've been doing the work in the field underneath, like undercover, down low, like working with people with the virus. But it was never a point where I was actually. But I winded up, the funny thing is, I always winded up in places where I would be working with people. I worked in a facility in the Bronx, New York, where it was a hotel for people with AIDS and HIV. Well, really, you had to have AIDS. You could HIV, you had to be at a certain level in your thing, and they were dying at that time. It was a really rough time. I remember coming into work sometimes, and you get close to people and you talk with them, and and then you come in the next weekend. I would do it was a weekend job. I would come in on the weekend, and then I see the yellow tape across the door. I was like, well, why is that room? What happened over there? Oh, that person expired, and this would happen, men and women would be expiring almost every other week, and I was like, wow. And then they just fill it up with another person, who had just maybe got out of the hospital, and it was ongoing, and it was a business. I understood, but I was there to help keep them fed, make sure they ate 3 square meals a day, on the weekend, and and just manage the house, make sure they got their medication, because of course I was dispensing medication at the time.
Yeah, but how'd that affect you? How'd that affect you, Phil? Because I know for me, watching other people perish as a result of HIV, knowing that they did, that was one thing. But just watching people get sick, I got sick myself in 2005, and people thought I was. The doctors thought I was a dead man. They told my family if I lived another 3 days, it would be a miracle, and it looked like that. It straight looked like that. All my organs had shut down. So people.
Wow.
Were I think God used me as a way to show what he can actually do, because that was a Lazarus moment, and I think that many of us have had those, but I don't know whether it's more traumatic to go through it yourself or to watch other people go through it and die or not die. How did it affect you working in the field, watching other people get sick and or die, knowing that you were positive?
Well, it made me a bit fearful, knowing my status at the time, but they wouldn't, I was seeing doctors, and the doctors wouldn't allow me to take any of the medications that they was giving everyone else. I says, well, if you say my levels are a certain level, but we don't think it's time yet. You don't need to do it. At that time it was AZT and all this stuff, and people were still perishing with this thing that they was giving them. And sometimes we would just say, maybe it's the medication. Well, they were unclear on what to do back in those days, but it was becoming better. I thank God for the things that they have today. I've been undetectable for as as long as I know, for like last 5, 6, 7 years. And that's been a blessing. But then again,
Larry, you were around AZT. Larry, you were around during AZT. Did you take AZT?
No, I was diagnosed in 95, and so the antiretroviral therapy was out during then, so I was very fortunate. However, if you go back to Los Angeles, California, in 1979, 1980, I'm also a respiratory therapist, and I was working at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles, which is right outside of West Hollywood. And we saw these young white gay men come into our respiratory intensive care unit, and all of them died. We didn't know what was going on. We didn't know why. So this was even before GRID. And so during that time, when you talk about death and dying, we were going to funerals sometimes 2 or 3 times a day.
That's
not
right.
a week, a day. We're talking about 81, 82. And as a therapist in hospitals, I watch our community, members of our community die alone by themselves, because oftentimes the family members would not reach out or allow their friends to be by their sides when they died because of homophobia, particularly within our community. There were people who were funeralized in gay bars because there was no place else for them. And so it was absolutely devastating. But the most devastating thing for me was I left LA in 1988 because I just could not get into recovery in LA. I just couldn't do it. And I went back to Philadelphia, and I did not go back to LA until 1993. I had about 2 or 3 years in recovery by then. When I went back to LA and heard about all of the people who died, it was one of the most traumatic experiences of my entire life. So, I was a bartender back then, in addition to being a respiratory therapist. So I knew everybody in the community. And to know over 90% of them died. Even back in Philadelphia, 90% of our community died.
And that was in the gay community in LA. And Phil, you were in New York?
Yes, New York, most of the time, and a little North Carolina for a while, but back to New York, yeah, mostly.
You're a straight guy, right?
Yeah, straight as I can be.
See, so now that's what I'm saying. These are the kind of conversations, because you touched on a lot of stuff, both of you, and we need to have a conversation between the gay community and the straight community as far as Black men are concerned, and stop the bullshit, because we have so much in common. And then I think there's some resentments and things that went on, the trauma that went on, and how, when you don't fight together, then you end up fighting each other. And I think there's still some residual of that. I'm not sure. What do you guys think? And I got to wrap this up soon, but what do you think before we end this?
I think that
Phil.
Go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, I kind of I accept the fact that that the help that we get, and thank God for the LGBT community, which able to help me, because I didn't take advantage of any of the things that was available to me until I got a certain age, and then I stopped working. I had to stop because I was doing some caretaking for my mom, but not until I got to a point to where I had to understand that I was dealing with a lot of other issues, dealing with, of course, raising a parent, working and moving, a divorce and moving back into New York City. But as far as the things that were available to the LGBT community, I took advantage of it later. They started telling me about this, they have that, you can use this, and I says, well. And in a sense, I was grateful that someone was looking, and they had so much advocacy going on, especially up here in New York, and because you couldn't get the services in North Carolina that they were offering in New York. And
that's
New York,
absolutely right. We had to fight together. And my ass was on fire. My ass was on fire, and I went where the water was. But a lot of people wouldn't even miss the information because they didn't even want to see it. They didn't want to be seen looking at the information, for fear that someone would identify them as being gay.
Exactly. Yes. And that's what it was too. Another fear.
Yeah.
Because people look at you like, well, he must be, and I says, I never, I was pretty promiscuous, but I don't, everyone I seemed to be, with women, but I was not healthy with it. I wouldn't clean myself. I would just do it. Like I say, wherever, worked in the nightclubs and being able to, I was just very, very promiscuous. And then, of course, the drug use back in the days, I used to shoot drugs too, so, and the people that I used to shoot drugs with died. They were gone, and they said they died of AIDS. And I says, my God, I didn't know at that time, about that, disease until I found out about it for myself. And then I started doing a little bit more research to find out what's going on with it. But then, like I say, I was in Iran for quite a while.
A lot of people died, and families still have not shared that they may have had the virus. They say that they died from something else because the stigma is so strong. They're worried about the legacy of a person because they think that it's a gay disease. So they figure that if a person died or contracted the virus, then they must have, and somehow that there's some kind of shame in that. And what I understand, and I can definitely understand it too, Larry, is that there may be some slight resentment with the fact that when it was time to fight for our lives, that people they were reticent to do that for whatever reason the case may be. What do you think?
Well, just to add to that, there were people in our community, particularly around the 80s, who came together and advocated for our health, particularly in Los Angeles. So, for example, I don't know if you know Carl Bean, who was actually died a couple of years ago, Bishop Carl Bean, who in the early 80s actually advocated for and established the Minority AIDS Project in Los Angeles, California, but also started the Unity Fellowship movement. This was a movement that during a time when, as Black gay men, we were told we were some abomination. We were told that if you got HIV, you deserved it. We were told that if you die, you deserved it.
Right.
This was a breath of fresh air who brought our community together, because oftentimes resources that came from the government went to white organizations, white gay organizations, and was not necessarily transitioned into our community. So we came together collectively and found safe haven in community. And what Carl started was a liberation theology movement, which says to Black gay men and women that you are okay exactly as you are, that you can bloom right where you are planted, and that God loved us exactly as we are. So that spirituality and sexual orientation were could live synergistically. And that was just something for me that was transformative, because I only knew one way. I've only been taught in the past, you're some abomination, you're going straight to hell, those kinds of things. So that movement allowed us to do the kind of internal work. And I think this is the clincher here, the internal work to accept yourselves as who you are.
Right.
As a Black gay man in America that is unapologetic about his or her sexual orientation. And I think in that sense, and then coming into a recovery community, there were bumps and bruises in the recovery community because everybody wasn't necessarily accepting. But overall, the recovery community was very supportive of who we were as Black gay men and women, as LGBTQ+. Because what we find out, Reggie, that we are more similar, as you said, than we are different. We all want to recover from the disease of addiction. We all want to live and survive and thrive with HIV. We all want these things. And when we combine our efforts together, we see that, again, we are more similar than we are different.
That's right. That's right. And as Black men in America, we all have one common trauma that we have to deal with, and we need to be dealing with that together. Phil, Larry,
Yes.
there's just so much that we need to talk about, and I'm so glad that we've begun to have this conversation. I want to thank both of you. This is Phil Newman out of New York City, Dr. Larry Bryant right here in Atlanta, Georgia, and they are both intercontinental brothers that are sharing their strength, hope, and experience, not only around the substance use history that we all share, and as well as living with HIV. And I just want to thank y'all for being the warriors that you are. And very briefly, because I got to ask you the question, what's right with you, Larry?
I am wholly free and freely whole to live my life authentically and unapologetically. Not only, and I've got some new identities. I now am a grandfather with a brand spanking new 19-year-old grandbaby.
Yes.
I now, on July 13th, we turned 70 years old.
Wow.
And so don't call me old. Don't call me a senior. My new identity is one of a community elder. And so I just love that.
You are wearing it well too, Larry. Phil, what's right with you, Phil?
What's right now is the fact that I have peace of mind. And it's something I never had. And I really appreciate having this peace of mind right now, knowing and feeling better about myself and continuing to go forward, doing, living life on life's terms, just being here and not allowing the government or anybody to divide us. Because I hear a lot of that, and sometimes the division comes when political and all kinds of other stuff get involved. But we got to stop allowing that to divide us, because we're one human race, and we just have to stay on point with that. And that's what keeps me centered and focused on what I need to do going forward too, because I feel like there's a purpose for me, and I just haven't quite touched on it yet. But whatever that purpose is, I'm ready to fill wherever it is where I need to be when the time gets here. So I guess I'm being prepared for that.
You are, most definitely, and I'm glad that we're walking that yellow brick road together. So thank you, Phil. Thank you, Larry, for joining us today. It's been another issue of Positive Attitudes. My name is Reggie Smith. Yesterday's history and tomorrow's still a mystery. Let's just keep the focus on what's going on right now. And if we do that, I'm sure we'll have our hearts and our minds in the right place. Until the next time, peace and blessings.
All right. Thank you. Good to meet you.